With the rapid speed of technological change, and with major shifts in societal, geopolitical, and climate landscapes, business is coming under more pressure to look beyond the bottom line and to reconsider their business agendas from a broader lens. But should corporations really bear the responsibility for making the world a better place? So how do we actually go about creating a more human corporate environment? What do we need to do to put humanity back into the corporation? On April 19 in Amsterdam, INSEAD directors met to discuss and debate this issue. And today we have two experts of corporate governance on this issue who have researched it and were at that meeting. Ludo van der Heyden, who is the INSEAD chaired professor of corporate governance and is the academic director of INSEAD's Corporate Governance Center, and Jaap Winter, who is a distinguished visiting professor of corporate governance. Ludo and Jaap, welcome.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for joining us for this interview. Jaap, could you tell me a little bit about what motivated you to actually look into this topic and research it?
I've worked in a law firm and corporate law practice for about 20 years. And during that time, I've got more and more concerned about what capital markets and investment is doing to the companies that I was working with. And I remember very vividly one case in which I worked with a company that closed down a factory in the Netherlands to move production to Poland. The consequence was that half of a village somewhere in the Netherlands became unemployed. And somehow the company did not take any interest. This was simply had to happen because the numbers would match up much better in Poland. And I thought, this is wrong. It can't be just like that. That answer is too simple. And I went on to study capital markets, institutional investment, regulation, the theory of the firm, remuneration. And actually, for me, all that ends up, if you combine all of that, it ends up in a situation where companies become dehumanized. What we care for as human beings suddenly doesn't matter anymore.
Ludo, why do you think this issue of rehumanizing the corporation is really surfacing now and getting greater attention by business and by society?
There are tremendous competitive pressures in the global world, and China has become the world center of manufacturing, and that's been a big job loss. So just the survival issue has become a very big issue. And I always say, why sustainability suddenly such a buzzword? It's largely because things are no longer sustainable. And we got used to, in the West, that things were sort of neatly sustainable and with high margins, and we could sort of arrange. And now we move to a world where we neither have the resources nor the time, nor necessarily the solutions. So I think that puts a lot of pressure on people. And people all the way from the bottom, the employees, to the top, directors. And I think it's time that directors take responsibility. And part of the issue that Jaap mentions is, what is the limit of markets? Is there a price for terminating an employment, at the end of the contract? What's in the contract? And I think these are societal issues that businesses face, but they need to face that within a societal context. And I think we're finally getting to for a host of reasons, we're getting to a situation where boards are now dealing with these actively and not passively by letting things happen.
Jaap, what do you think the challenges are for corporations that need to address the issue of rehumanizing their workplaces?
Well, three things that make it difficult for companies to really address this. When as a company, you are under constant global competitive pressure, there is very little time to actively take stock, stand still, and reflect, are we doing the right sort of things? How can we do it fundamentally differently? Secondly, for those of us who individually work in that environment, if success of you in that environment is defined by the mainstream, it's incredibly hard to challenge that mainstream. You're not going to do that because you're defying your own future. And thirdly, as a result of that, you get the metaphorical frog in the boiling pot who stays in until it's too late. He's dead before he can jump out. And we find out too late that actually what we've been working on for a very long time is no longer working.
For two reasons. One is very often when the company is basically meeting sort of a standstill and doesn't know where to go, they say that's a problem. But in fact, that's a symptom. The root cause is the board was not anticipating or preparing the future. The shareholder might lose their financial stake, but lots of other people are affected, communities, employees, customers, etc. So boards, I think, have to deal with it. The positive side is that in this creative destruction, or in this Schumpeterian movement, where, you know, Schumpeter said markets are good because they destruct jobs, but then they also create new opportunities, and they also manage this transition efficiently. I think in this creative destruction, people are coming back to sort of say, look, our key resource are our people. So now the question is a choice. If we're going to change business, we may have to change people. And that, of course, is also a public-private societal issues, which is what's the contract between the government that gets tax revenue and the company? What is the responsibility for the company when actually the workers are no longer as productively engaged? And the key question is, who's going to retrain them so that they can come back to, is that the company or is that society?
We often talk about technology as being a double-edged sword. On the one hand, digital connectivity increases interpersonal interactions, but it's reducing the human touch. What do you think that, based on your research and your interactions in the Amsterdam meeting, what are some of the challenges that technology brings corporations?
I would say from the Amsterdam meeting, I was most impressed by the opportunities that can be seized. You know, we had great examples from Randstad developing the technological toolkit in order to bring better solutions to people, in order to do better matching. Randstad is a placement agency and a job matching agency. That's the good side, which is technology should help create a better world. Now we're living through another period, which is artificial intelligence. In the US, there's a big discussion that you don't need directors anymore. You just need to appoint a robot, because robots are not misguided by emotions, and they know more, and they can work 24 hours a day. And they can, through sensing machines, be in touch with the rest of the world. That's formidable competition for directors. I personally feel robots cannot be responsible. We need to keep the upper hand. But technology is a double-edged sword. I think what is the problem is the acceleration. And I think that's what's sort of probably new, is the pace of change. And humans can adjust to change if they have time. And we know we're running out of time.
Jaap, can you give me a couple of examples from your own research of some of the best practices that you've observed of corporations that are really trying to grapple with the issue of rehumanizing?
I was the president of one of the universities in Amsterdam, and that's a typical environment flooded with regulation and bureaucracy. All of that regulation basically takes out the inspiration of our real people to aspire to be great for your students. So we introduced what we call the Kafka button. And everybody who came across a rule or a process that nobody could explain why we're actually doing this, they would push the button and we would simply delete the rule or the process, stop it, and see what comes of it. And probably nothing comes of it. And we have examples where nothing really changed and we now live without the rule. That's one. And the other example is what you've mentioned already, Ludo, Randstad. I'm a member of the board of Randstad. And so we asked the executives, come up with a strategy that really touches upon that humanity and humanitarian effect as well. And they came up with the strategy Human Forward, deliberately talking about the human values that we hold dear in the company, not meaning that we're always successful in it, but at least making it a conscious decision to want to talk about that and challenge ourselves on it.
Society often looks at regulators as being the real gatekeepers, the port that really kind of keeps corporations behaving better. Do you think that more regulation is the answer to better corporate behavior?
I would not advocate that all the rules are bad, but when you have too many of them, they certainly become counterproductive. Then it's very extreme. It's actually paradoxical. But when we pile rules upon the compliance and supervision, etc., on them, they actually become less responsible. They only become less responsible for compliance and no longer for the consequences of their behavior. It reduces responsibility.
Ludo, tell me a little bit about what do you think the role of shareholders should be in all of this to sort of nudge corporations towards better behavior?
Part of the issue is the role of shareholders and getting more integrity between the shareholder, me as a shareholder, me as a consumer, me as a manager. And the whole issue always is, if you were the manager, would you like to have that shareholder? If you were the customer, would you actually trust the shareholder? And I think that is the good news of technology, which is increased transparency will allow the customers to choose companies that actually build a better future.
Do you agree with what is often said, which is that we should leave it to the market as being the way forward to enforcing better actions on the part of corporations? Leave it to the market?
No, I don't believe at all that you should leave the market. Markets is a means to an end. What is the end? I think that is the key question.
Jaap, what do you think the role of stakeholders should be as a voice and a force for change?
However much we want to rely on shareholders making value judgments in a different way than just financial, it's going to be hard for them to actually do that. Well, if you would involve employees and customers who are on the ground experiencing what it is doing to them personally, whether they value it or not, you get a different type of information, feedback into the decision making that is relevant. I've advocated for some time now the classic old cooperative as a form in which multi-stakeholders from different angles could generate and could share in the control to share the value that is created for them equally.
What do you think the role of boards should be in actually weighing in for the interests of stakeholders?
Boards have to write a new agenda of the sort of questions they raise in the boardroom and share their concerns about with the executives. It's not just about the financial performance now and in the near future. It is also about the impact that the company has through its products in the markets with its own employees. And that is a change. It's a fundamental change for board members to go through.
Well, Ludo and Jaap, thank you very much for talking to us today about rehumanizing the corporation.
You're welcome,
Thank
Sarah.
you. A pleasure.